Why elders never spoke about certain deaths. Why would silence be more powerful than mourning? There were deaths elders cried for, and deaths they refused to mention. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared too much. In many African traditions, silence was not denial, it was protection. Because elders believed some deaths were dangerous to speak about. And they had a reason. Some deaths were buried twice. Elders did not see all deaths the same way. They divided them quietly into two kinds: open deaths and closed deaths. Open deaths were expected old age, long illness, a life completed. These deaths were spoken of openly, mourned publicly, remembered in stories. But closed deaths were different. Sudden deaths, deaths with no explanation, deaths that came too early, deaths that arrived without warning. Elders believed these deaths left a door open, and when a door is open, anything can pass through. So they closed it with silence. There is a belief elders rarely explain directly. What is spoken repeatedly learns the path back. Elders believed constant discussion of certain deaths acted like an invitation, not to memory, but to repetition. They noticed patterns. One sudden death, then another. One strange accident, then a similar one. One unexplained loss, followed by more. So elders reduced words. They shortened mourning. They discouraged questions. They redirected conversations. Not because they were cold, but because they believed language carried energy, and some energy should not be fed. Elders believed death was not always the end of movement, especially sudden death. They believed the spirit needed guidance, direction, closure. Too much talking, crying, or questioning was believed to confuse that process. Silence was containment. It was a way of saying, do not linger, do not return, do not echo. This is why elders controlled who cried loudly, who spoke at the burial, who told the story, because they believed uncontrolled grief could pull something back that was already trying to leave. Children noticed something early. They would ask, why don't we talk about it? Why is her name never mentioned? Elders avoided answering. Because children, they believed, were open vessels. They absorbed stories deeply, without filters, without protection. Elders believed telling children about certain deaths planted fear, curiosity, or attachment where it did not belong. So silence was mercy. Not secrecy, not neglect, mercy. Stories passed only in whispers. But silence did not mean forgetting. Some stories were told, just not loudly. Not often, not to everyone. They were whispered, at night, to specific ears, because elders believed some knowledge must travel softly. They believed loud stories demanded attention, but whispered stories demanded understanding. These stories were not shared to scare, they were shared to prepare. And if you were told one, it meant elders believed you were ready. Some deaths were buried twice. When elders said some deaths were buried twice, they did not mean the body. The first burial was physical, the second was symbolic. The second burial was silence. No repetition, no reenactment. No constant retelling. They buried the event so it would not rise again. Because elders believed not everything heals through expression. Some things heal through containment, and that is why silence to them was not weakness. It was wisdom. Why some names were never spoken again. One of the most confusing things for outsiders was this. After certain deaths, elders erased names. Not from memory, but from speech. A name, elders believed, was not just a label, it was a core. Every time you spoke it, something answered. So for some deaths, elders avoided names entirely. They said that person, they said the one who passed. They said nothing at all. Because they believed saying the name too often could pull the spirit's attention back, keep grief alive longer than necessary, or awaken something that had not fully settled. Silence was how elders loosened the core. Why elders feared curious questions after certain deaths. After a closed death, elders discouraged questions. Not because questions were wrong, but because curiosity, they believed, opened doors. How did it happen? Why so suddenly? What really went wrong? Elders believed these questions created mental replays, and replays strengthened memory, and strong memory strengthened return. They noticed something unsettling. The more people dissected a strange death, the more fear spread. The more patterns appeared, the more similar events followed. So elders interrupted curiosity with silence. They believed not all truths were meant to be chased. Some truths, once chased, begin chasing back. When mourning was shortened on purpose. In some villages, mourning periods were intentionally shortened. No long gatherings, no repeated wailing, no extended storytelling. This confused many people, but elders believed prolonged mourning for certain deaths could anchor the spirit too strongly to the living. They feared excessive grief could delay departure, so they limited time, they redirected energy. They returned people to routine quickly, not because the loss was small, but because the risk was large. Why elders sometimes changed burial locations. Another quiet practice elders never explained openly. Some bodies were not buried where people expected. Not near the home, not beside ancestors, not in familiar ground. Elders believed certain deaths carried imbalance. And imbalance, they believed, should not be placed among the settled. So they chose neutral ground. Distant ground, quiet ground. The goal was not punishment, it was separation. They believed death was powerful, and power, when uncontrolled, had to be placed carefully. Why some death stories emerged years later. Some stories stayed buried for decades. Then suddenly, long after fear had faded, elders spoke. Why then? Because elders believed time weakened danger. Once patterns ended, once repetition stopped, once the community stabilized, only then was it safe to speak. That's why some people heard the truth about a death only in old age. Not because elders lied, but because they waited until the story could no longer harm. Elders made a distinction most people no longer understand. Remembering is not the same as invoking. To remember was to learn. To invoke was to awaken. Elders feared accidental invocation. That's why silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate. They remembered quietly, so nothing would answer loudly. One of the most unsettling things elders did after certain deaths was to behave as if nothing had happened. The sun rose, work continued. Meals were cooked, children were sent outside to play. To outsiders, it looked cruel. But elders believed attention fed energy. They believed grief, when magnified publicly, could anchor a presence too strongly, so they reduced reaction, not because they felt nothing, but because they feared too much feeling could disturb what was trying to rest. Normalcy, they believed, was a signal. This world is moving forward. Do not linger. After some deaths, elders quietly removed objects. A mat, a cup, a tool, a seat, not as superstition, but as containment. They believed objects absorbed moments, and sudden deaths left heavy moments behind. Removing objects was not erasing memory, it was releasing attachment. That's why some items were buried, burned, or given away without explanation. They were not cursed, they were full. There were moments elders silenced laughter, not permanently, but temporarily, because they believed sudden emotional shifts, from grief to joy, created imbalance. They feared imbalance more than sadness. They believed spirits followed rhythm, and sharp changes in rhythm caused confusion. So elders stabilized emotion. They kept the emotional ground level until everything settled. After a closed death, elders watched strangers carefully, visitors, travelers, new faces, not out of suspicion, but awareness. They believed sudden deaths disrupted balance, and imbalance attracted attention. So elders observed quietly, who lingered, who asked too many questions, who arrived unexpectedly. They believed not everything that comes after a death is coincidence. Silence helped them observe without interference. Perhaps the hardest truth elders carried was this: some deaths had no explanation. No lesson, no warning, no reason. Elders believed forcing meaning onto such deaths created false understanding. And false understanding, they believed, was more dangerous than ignorance. So they accepted mystery. They believed wisdom included knowing when not to know. Silence was how they honored that boundary. To elders, silence was not neglect, it was restraint. They believed love was not always expressed through speech. Sometimes love was expressed through protection. Protection from fear. Protection from repetition. Protection from carrying weight that was not yours to carry. Silence was how elders loved the living and respected the dead. This is why elders never spoke about certain deaths. Not because they were hiding truth, but because they were guarding balance. They understood something we often forget. Not every wound heals by being opened. Not every story needs to be told. Not every loss needs explanation. Some things survive only when handled quietly. Silence to elders was not emptiness. It was intention. It was how they closed doors without slamming them, how they remembered without invoking, how they protected the living while releasing the dead. And maybe that is why some of the deepest wisdom was never written, never announced, never shouted. It was whispered or not spoken at all. If you have ever wondered why certain stories disappeared, why some names were avoided, why some questions were never answered, now you understand. Silence was never absence, it was care. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, subscribe and share The Hidden Voice. Some wisdom only survives when it is passed on quietly.